Welcome to Empowered. I'm Elizabeth Naumovski. Empowered is where women's stories rise, ideas spark, and courage takes center stage. Today, we're diving into what every woman deserves at work and in life: psychological safety. Now, the definition of psychological safety is an environment of rewarded vulnerability. So, why do so many talented women hold back until perfection feels guaranteed? And how can we speak truth to power without being labeled difficult? And what subtle signs remind us that our voice actually matters? My guest today helps women and leaders build spaces where confidence, not caution, leads the way. This conversation might just change the way you show up and how you're heard. Today's topic is architecting psychological safety for women. I'm joined by Karen Kemerling, CEO and founder of K2 Leadership Development. Karen, welcome to Empowered. I'm so happy to see you again.
Oh, so good to be here. It's nice to see you, Elizabeth. Thanks for having me.
So, I have quite a few questions that begin with why. So, let's begin. Why do women still hesitate to speak up in meetings?
Yeah. Um, so the definition, let's go back to the definition really quick. An environment of rewarded vulnerability. So what's key in the definition there is that the environment is different for everybody, but the environment is the culture, is the team, is the place where people show up at work, in their churches, wherever there's a team. And so rewarded vulnerability is individual, but the environment is the thing that controls that. So what's important, people don't speak up, especially females, because it's risky and they hesitate because of a past experience, team dynamics, unspoken expectations. So let's talk about expectations just really quick because this is important. There's this thing called the double bind, if you've ever heard of it. And I have my hands up here because there's the characteristics of a male leader and there's the characteristics of a female leader. And the characteristics of a typical male leader are assertive, strong, dominant, decisive, ambitious. And the characteristics of a female leader are compassionate, supportive, humble, agreeable. And those are pretty different. And the leader in the world, in the business world, is typically based on the male persona or the male characteristics. So a good leader is strong, confident, decisive, competent, competitive. Um, and those are things that align with male characteristics. So that makes it really hard for a female from an environmental standpoint to speak up because she does not show up in the same way that a typical leader or male might show up. And therefore, we end up in this thing called the double bind. And that's where it's tough because you're either labeled assertive, which becomes sort of bossy and difficult, or you're quiet and then you're looked at as not a leader, or you're not, you don't have the leadership chops that are required. So that's why across the board, speaking up the environment is very difficult for females.
Wow. Okay. So, when you talk about women, uh, I've talked to so many young women who want perfection. But why do
Mm.
so many women feel pressure to be perfect before contributing? Because there's no such thing as perfection. It's a moving scale.
Yeah, same thing. So it fits into this whole concept of adaptive response to the environment. So women have a tendency to be perceived more harshly um, from a just an assessment standpoint than men do. And so we overdo it. We overthink about how do I get prepared? How am I going to show up perfect? That kind of thing, which makes it very difficult to be able to jump into something and be able to kind of half have it done and feel safe to say I'm just working on this and that kind of thing. We have to overdo it because of that double bind. Because women are expected to be competent and likable at the same time, and that makes it hard.
It
Yeah.
does make it hard. When we come back from commercial, I want to talk to you about women often carrying the emotional labor on teams. And I want to bring in the word empathy as well. So please don't go away. We'll be right back with Karen's anecdotes of, how we can work better. Welcome back to Empowered. I'm Elizabeth Naumovski. Today's topic is architecting psychological safety for women. Now, Karen, before we went to break, we were talking about why women often carry the emotional labor on their teams. And I brought in the word empathy. Could you please explain that?
Yeah. Um, so women are expected to be more kind, collaborative. You think about this double bind thing we're talking about, and so the emotional load that we carry is when you're in teams. There's this expectation that we are good at empathy and love and connection and all of those things. And so when there's a disagreement or there's people issues, women have a tendency to get asked to like manage or take care of that. And that, unfortunately, that's very stressful. People problems are very stressful. They're a time suck and they don't get rewarded. Back to the male and the leadership competencies that are rewarded. Managing kind of the team and the people and the empathy and those kind of things are not something that is viewed as good expectations of leaders today. Now, maybe that's changing, but we predominantly have the male, and I'm not here to pick on the male, so that's not
Well,
my
no, we
intent. But
because this is
the
always
reality,
positive, male, female.
yeah, so it's reality that most of business has been based on, traditionally the male characteristics. And so the female characteristics in the work world end up showing up in places where it's like, we expect you to be warm and collaborative and empathetic and understanding, all of those things. Um, and while we are, that's stressful, it's time consuming, and it doesn't put us in a place where we're looking at strategy and being decisive and being competent and those things. It's mostly handling the day to day of the people stuff.
But
So,
I think that has to do with the fact that we've all worked in male dominated industries before, and there weren't that many female leaders, women leaders that could mentor us and get us to that next level. Which makes me ask this next question: why do some workplaces reward confidence more than competence? Because that's a big one.
yeah. Um, so confidence comes across as the first person that speaks up, sometimes the most assertive, the loudest person, the most maybe extroverted. And those are, again, male characteristics. Women, many times, are, if you are assertive and you are competent and you show up as like you're capable, you can get labeled as bossy and that you don't fit the norms of what the good female is, as opposed to the good leader and the male. Um, so here's one thing I would suggest, which is great, and I just want to share this because it's worked for me. It's called name it, tame it. And so when you show up in a room where it's predominantly male, people are equal or maybe above you, and you have a situation where you are asked to manage all the people or deal with the emotional issues. The idea here, name it, tame it, is to be able to say, hey, this is an opportunity for all of us and not just me, to be able to hijack that thing in your brain that says that's a male thing and females should be taking care of the people. While we do that, it helps short circuit that, recognize that collaboration and teamwork is important to the whole organization and to the success of the team. And it's not just the female's responsibility. So, name it, tame it is kind of an important thing as we get into this for multiple things where you have to have the courage to be vulnerable, to say, hey, here's what's going on, and get your brain out of the immediately, I know how to solve the problem. The female does this, the male does that. It stops that and allows us to think through, wait a second, maybe there is a different way. And that's where we're at. That's the important component of this emotional labor thing that women carry.
Karen, I love the fact that you said have the courage to be vulnerable because that's not just in the workplace. That's in personal relationships. That's in friendships. That's in everything that we do. And I think one of the key things is a lot of people don't have the courage to be vulnerable and think, what are people going to think about me, and how am I going to deal with this? I want to talk about that when we come back, but I also want to talk about the fact that there are so many times that we'll put an idea out and somebody else steals it. I want to talk to you about how we deal with that. So please don't go away. We'll be right back with more. Welcome back to Empowered. I'm Elizabeth Naumovski. Today's topic is architecting psychological safety for women. Now, Karen, before we went to break, we were talking about the courage to be vulnerable. There's a lot of people that say, well, I don't know how to do that. Do you have anything that can help somebody step out of their comfort zone and take that courage and become a vulnerable individual?
Yeah, so vulnerability is an individual thing. So Brene Brown, if we're familiar with her, would say vulnerability is this dark emotion, but it's also the birthplace for innovation and creativity. But if you feel safe when you're vulnerable, you feel love, belonging, joy, and empathy. And to create an environment that fosters that, the leader has a true role in recognizing how they show up and helping people, male, female, feel safe to be able to challenge the status quo, to learn, to grow, to contribute. So innovation and creativity is unlocked. So that's a key component of having some of that courage. I would look to the leaders within organizations who want innovation and creativity and who doesn't today in the business climate. With everything we have going with, I'm in the United States, but with the tariffs, with the government, with AI, with all of the challenges, um, people need to be able to feel safe to show up and challenge the status quo, and that takes vulnerability. So leaders really have a role here in supporting this growth and making that happen. Yeah.
So, you talk about, you know, vulnerability creates creativity. So, what do I do when my ideas are ignored, but then later it's repeated by someone else and it's an embraced?
Yeah. The hardest part is don't shut down. I know I felt that in my life where I'll be the only female in the room. I'll bring something up, and 15, 20 minutes later, somebody will say, "Hey, let's do XYZ. This is a great idea." And I'll be like, "I think that was my idea." Um, so the encouragement from my perspective and from real life really is don't shut down. And what I mean by that is to be able to say, "Ah, thank you for bringing that up. And let's go back to the idea that I brought up earlier. I'm glad you heard me. Let's double down. Let's all collaborate. Let's contribute to growing that idea." So the don't shut down is important because it's easy to get triggered. We're human. I know I am, and I could feel irritated and frustrated with that human, but recognize that there's an opportunity there to foster and grow the idea and set an example to be able to say, thanks for recognizing that we brought that up. I brought that up earlier, and let's keep going. Let's keep talking about it. So
So I
I think,
want to continue. I'd like to continue more about subtly shutting down. How do I know if my workplace is actually subtly shutting people down? How do you understand that and deal with it?
yeah, I mean, in a meeting, you can tell right away if the leader is the first person to speak and he or she basically is not open to inputs from others. And when someone does bring something up, they're defensive or quick to jump to, we've tried that before. Um, you can tell right away if the room is silent. If it's mostly a check the box kind of meeting and going through the agenda, that's a true example of something else is going on here where people are uh, uncomfortable.
So we have less than a minute before break, but I want to start with this question. because it is about psychological safety. So, what does real psychological safety actually look like on a team?
Yeah. Well, when people can speak up and feel like they don't have to have it perfect, some of the things we talked about earlier, they're
Mhm.
willing to not have 100% of everything, that they're given the benefit of the doubt. If there's a mistake that's made, it's about learning, like um being able to ask for help without feeling weak. Those are all examples of ways within teams where it's clear that the environment embraces being vulnerable, and it builds on itself. The more you do that, the more you can do that. Becomes the norm of the team, and those are the teams that are successful. The ones that can be vulnerable, that can ask for help, make mistakes, and learn from them. Those are the ones that you want to be on. And those are the ones that create innovation and creativity for.
Don't go away. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Empowered. I'm Elizabeth Naumovski. Today's topic is architecting psychological safety for women. I'm joined by Karen Kemerling, CEO and founder of K2 Leadership Development. Okay, Karen, last segment, we have so much to cover. What is the single leadership behavior that builds safety fastest?
It's the leader being able to model vulnerability, to be able to show up and be open to taking a risk and letting others do the same. That's super important.
So, that vulnerability has popped up again in this segment, which is really, really important.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, so vulnerability. Go ahead, sorry. My
No,
bad.
I was going to say, in the beginning of the show, we talked about signals that tell women that their voices matter. What are the small signals that women should be aware of that will tell them that their voice matters?
Yeah. So they're invited into a conversation, they're not interrupted, they're acknowledged for their contributions. Um, they are publicly rewarded, by others so that you can see it, name it, tame it. People feel acknowledged for the work that they've done. Those are great ways to really help anybody, but a female, know that they matter.
And you were going to touch about vulnerability again before I had cut you off.
Yeah, I just think that vulnerability, back to the leader, it's really about being open to saying, hey, I might be wrong, modeling that in front of others, setting an example. Your behavior is by far the most important thing that you can do. Um, so you can make the environment safe to be vulnerable by modeling it yourself, which means taking some risks and saying, I made a mistake and asking for help. Those are key things.
You know, saying you've made a mistake is okay because we all need to make mistakes in order to build upon our foundation for success. We need to learn from it. We can't just, have that myopic look and say, this is what I made my mind on, and this is what I'm going to do. And I think it's really key that you just said, you know what? It's okay to own mistakes.
Mhm. Yeah. It's hard. I mean, it depends on the environment. It's got to be safe to be able
Mhm.
to say, I made a mistake here and here's what happened. And have people be able to rally around that and support that versus hold that against you. That's how the environment becomes safe versus not safe.
Yeah. And so, we'll talk about leaders again. How can leaders create space where disagreement is welcome and it's safe? It's okay.
Yeah. So in my mind, one of the easiest things they can do is create what I would call like a working agreement where we work on an ongoing basis of incorporating obstacles and issues. And so it's a norm of a team instead of one person's responsibility or somebody that gets branded, the person that always brings up the issues. Is like, no, no, we're going to follow a process where everything we look at incorporates the vision, the mission, the why we're doing it, the small steps, but the obstacles that we're going to run into. And everybody participates. It's not just one person. So it becomes the norm. It becomes much more natural. And there isn't one person that feels like, I got to carry that weight. So that's a core thing that a leader can do is incorporate that into the way they manage and lead.
So, last question. We've got 30 seconds left. How do leaders unintentionally silence the smartest voices in the room? Because this is important.
Unintentionally, by being the first people to speak in, by shutting down, by listening to the most loudest, boldest, assertive voices, and having that sort of, confirmation bias that whoever speaks first that appears to be the most confident and is correct, and therefore some of the people that are competent maybe don't speak up as much or have to get more data, take more time, are shut down. And those are key ways that are problems. And in order to avoid that, leaders have to be able to incorporate those other voices.
Thank you so much, Karen. Karen's words of wisdom to you are the single most important factor in creating psychological safety is the behavior that the leader models. Leaders are either leading the way or getting in the way. I'm Elizabeth Naumovski, and I'm here to empower you and make frugality fashionable. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.